Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Boy, I hate to interrupt such lively discussions. I'm Jeff Gold, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Success here at the Chancellor's Office in Long Beach, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to Day 2 of the Graduation Initiative 2025 Symposium. I have been told that we almost broke the internet yesterday. With over 3 million impressions on social media to hashtag Graduation Initiative 2017, it is a huge record for our system. Before we begin today, I would be remiss as I look around the room at all the faces around the room, all the hard work that's happened, if I didn't publicly acknowledge how proud we are of the incredible work that all of you do on behalf of students of the CSU. So if you'll indulge me for just a minute, please take a minute, I know we're eating breakfast, but to look around the person next to you, to your right, to your left. Look at the people. Look at the other folks around your table. Look around the corners of the room, and what you'll see is the same thing that I see from up here is a group of incredibly talented people who have come here today, like me, like you, for the same purpose, to give of themselves, to give of their lives, to give of their careers, to focus on improving the lives dramatically of the students in the CSU. So please join me in giving yourselves a big hand. You know, as I was driving home last night thinking about my remarks for today, I really had three salient takeaways, three things that came to mind from yesterday's great day one that I wanted to share with you. The first was some feedback that I received from a colleague during the reception who came up to me, put his arm around my shoulder and said, reminded me, I should say, with a scoffing voice, that prohibition in this country had ended almost 100 years ago. He then looked at me and said, "Why on God's green earth did you make the decision not to serve alcoholic beverages at the reception last night?" So I have to admit, it was pretty good feedback, but in all seriousness, that did not make my top 3 list of key takeaways from yesterday. So now, in all seriousness, the first takeaway I had from yesterday's proceedings really had to do with the importance of partnerships, the critical importance of partnerships for this work we're doing. Now, this was more covert than overt in the presentations. There was no session on presentations. But if you listen carefully to the words of Bridget Burns, the head of the University Innovation Alliance, that is the spirit of what she talked about. She mentioned how she is leading an organization that has brought together universities throughout the country voluntarily to look at what they are doing to improve student success, to learn from one another, to trust one another, to challenge each other to do better. When I reflect on that and I think about the good work that we've done in the system and on the campuses, it encourages me to do even more, to look deeper for how we can collaborate, because so many of the solutions are in this room. There's so much to learn from the power in this room right now. The second key takeaway I had was all about data, and I'm looking for my friend William Franklin around the room, who led yesterday's wonderful session, facilitated the group, and talked deeply and at every opportunity, unabashedly, about his passion for data, about how in his work in student affairs at Dominguez Hills, data governs and drives everything that he does, and the importance of that. So while I was smiling in the back of the room by hearing that, I was also happy to hear Will DePilar from the Education Trust mention the research that his team does day in and day out, and specifically talk about a couple of research studies that they have done that show specifically certain campuses throughout the nation that have done amazing things to not only close the achievement gap, but to have brought about the highest graduation rates out of all students for students of color in their universities. And so as we challenge ourselves to think differently about how we're going to close the gap, about our biggest challenge, There are opportunities to look across the nation for examples of other universities who have done the same. The last takeaway is really about this equity gap. Again, no session specifically talking about the equity gap, but it pervaded everything we heard yesterday. In fact, when Sarah Goldrick-Rab kicked off yesterday's session, her eloquent talk mentioned the nuances of financial need, how it governs and oversees and embodies the aspect that every student has when they come to the CSU. The finances are so intertwined with the student experience that we have to be mindful of that. And so as she spoke, I thought of the campus plans, your campus plans, that all of you have done to orient your work around the graduation initiative and to explicitly talk about the equity gap. And I reflected on our work centrally, and as you see the policies that are coming out of our office, as you see the intentionality of our strategies around the graduation initiative, I hope you'll be mindful of the fact that closing the equity gap is front and center in everything we do and will continue to be front and center. For now, though, I would like to point you, for those of you who have your binders in front of you, some of the folders in front of you, there's a piece of research there that I'd like to point to you that talks about redefining the way that we look at traditionally underserved students. I encourage you to read that as it talks about a continuum of being what it means to be underprepared, as opposed to a binary point in time. Are you a member of an underrepresented group, ethnicity, or are you Pell eligible or not Pell eligible? So I'm going to take the next 4 minutes to have the folks in the back of the room cue a video, a short animation, a 4-minute animation that gives an overview of this important research. I'm going to go ahead and cue that video. Oh, here we go.
The California State University educates the most ethnically and economically diverse student body in the nation. With nearly 500,000 students across 23 campuses, our mission is to ensure that every student, regardless of background, has the opportunity to earn a high-quality degree in preparation for a lifetime of achievement. As we continue to make progress towards fulfilling this commitment, we must be mindful that certain student populations, for a variety of reasons, graduate at lower rates than their peers. We commonly refer to this disparity as the equity gap. At the CSU, we believe it is critical for the long-term success of our students, their families, and the state of California that we not leave behind our most underserved students. This is a primary reason why we have launched Graduation Initiative 2025, a bold effort to help facilitate our students' path to a high-quality college degree and close equity gaps across the CSU system. So what have we done to better understand these equity gaps? Until recently, we have limited our focus on underserved students by only considering their economic status or their ethnicity. While this approach has helped us to identify part of the equity gap, the reality is that our students are much more complex and require us to employ a more comprehensive means of identifying and serving them. To fully close equity gaps, we must look at a combination of factors that put a student at risk for not graduating. These include attributes such as first-generation status. Over 1/3 of CSU students are the first in their family to attend college. These students are often far less familiar with the process of navigating the requirements needed to move through their college experience. College readiness. Approximately 40% of students encounter difficulties completing college-level work based on their high school preparation. This has a big impact on how long it takes them to earn their degree. Economic challenges. Over half of CSU students receive federal grants, struggle to finance their education, and often need to work many hours to make ends meet. This can impact how much time and energy they are able to dedicate to their studies. Coming from underrepresented communities. Approximately half of our students identify as members of ethnic communities that have been historically underrepresented. These students often require extra support in order to foster their sense of belonging on campus. Our research indicates that each of these attributes in different ways can impact how long it takes students to earn their degree. Additionally, by considering the combination of these factors, we can better understand the complexity of our students and, more importantly, identify the specific support structures that they need to be successful. For example, a CSU student may come from a low-income household, be the first in her family to go to college, and enter academically underprepared. By identifying all three of these characteristics together, we can provide the student with a more robust suite of support than if we were to focus exclusively on her low-income status. If she participates in a paid internship and can rely on a peer mentor, her chances of graduating may increase. This model allows campus leaders to be much more strategic in ensuring that campus support is readily available to the students who need it the most. By recognizing the complexity of the CSU student body, this new model helps us better define what it means to be historically underserved, affording us exciting opportunities to more effectively provide student support services and thereby close equity gaps and facilitate the path to a high-quality degree for all CSU students. A California State University educates the most ethnically and economically
Thank you. I encourage you folks over the next few days to take the time to read through that literature and see how it applies to providing a much more sophisticated, nuanced view of the achievement gap, the equity gap on your campuses. Finally, I'd like to return briefly to my first talking point, which was about the critical importance of partnerships. I'd like to welcome to the stage Kristen Krellin, the past president of the CSU Alumni Council, a Titan at heart, a CSU Fullerton graduate, and currently vice president of Schools First Federal Credit Union. Please join me in welcoming Kristen to the stage.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning. I am so pleased to join you for Day 2 of the Graduation Initiative 2025 Symposium. I bring greetings on behalf of Manolo Morales, President of the CSU Alumni Council, who unfortunately is ill today. As an alumni leader at both my campus and at the system level, I've been thinking a lot about the big ideas that yesterday's speakers focused on, including college affordability, equity, and innovation. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm very excited. I'm excited for what this will mean for the CSU and our position as a national leader in serving students. I am selfishly excited for what this will mean for our campus alumni associations, as more students have the opportunity to achieve their academic goals, earn a degree, and join the ever-growing ranks of CSU alumni. But most of all, I am excited for what this means for the CSU students. The years I spent as a student at San Diego State and Cal State Fullerton were wonderful. I've made lifelong friends, I've learned how to be a leader, and I earned a degree in history that has opened doors for the career that I have today. Yet my experiences weren't without a few speed bumps. I started classes at a community college in Orange County right after high school. After 1 year, I transferred to San Diego State. I had a great experience, living in the dorms, making a lot of friends, and experiencing college as any 19-year-old should. However, my senior year, I was unable to get the classes I needed to take, so I left, and I started court reporting. 3 years later, I fell, hurt my hand, and was no longer able to type at 200 words a minute. I couldn't continue that. So I thought to myself, what now? I had 29 units left to get my degree, so I went back to college at Cal State Fullerton. And this time, I was an adult student attending classes at night. I arrived on campus for my classes, walked straight to my building, and then I walked right back to my car after class. I didn't have the luxury of experiencing college life this time. I continued my night classes and eventually graduated with my degree, and I was 9 months pregnant when I was finished. Even though it took me 10 years to get my degree, I'll never forget the feeling I had filling out the form for my daughter's birth certificate in the hospital, asking what my level of education was. Both of her parents were college graduates. And this experience isn't unique to San Diego State, Cal State Fullerton, or even to the CSU. But what is different is that we aren't sticking with business as usual. Instead, through the graduation initiative, we are taking steps to think and act differently and to better serve students. For me, graduating from the California State University has opened up a lifetime of possibilities. And as a past president of the CSU Alumni Council, I hope to see these opportunities available to all CSU students. That is why the Alumni Council is all in on Graduation Initiative 2025. This summer, we developed an Alumni Relations Toolkit that highlights best practices campus alumni associations can draw on to help engage their own alumni in supporting the goals of the Graduation Initiative. These best practices are focused on two key areas where alumni can play a significant role in student success. The first is career preparation, helping students connect their studies with real-world applications while they gain experience in their field. The second is basic needs, because students who are unsure where their next meal is going to come from, or if they have a roof over their head tomorrow, are simply not able to be as focused on their studies as their peers. The best practices included in the toolkit are categorized by the impact they will have on student success, the resources needed to achieve it, and the level of time of commitment. For example, a campus alumni association with limited resources and limited time might create a matching gift campaign that would provide matching gifts for donation to campus basic needs programs. This approach was used at Fresno State and resulted in an incredible $85,000 in donations for the student cupboard. At the same time, an alumni association with more resources and more time might work with student affairs to determine how alumni can be more involved with students' first-year experience programming. If we can bring first-year students and alumni together to discuss careers, it may lead to increased student understanding of which majors best lead to certain career paths and reduce the number of times that the student changes their major. Whether a campus alumni association is developing paid alumni techniques, arranging for emergency housing for students, or taking any other of the actions included in the toolkit, they all share an interest in, dedication to, and passion for Graduation Initiative 2025. At your tables is a business card, right here in the middle, with a link to the Alumni Relations Toolkit. As you take what you have learned at the symposium back to your campuses, consider all 3.4 million CSU alumni will be your allies at work. We stand ready and eager to help the student success efforts because ultimately, CSU alumni represent 3.4 million reasons why the Graduation Initiative is not only important, but essential. For many of us, the CSU changed the trajectory of our future, and by working together, we are going to do the same for all CSU students. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure now to introduce the next speaker, Professor of Communication Studies at Sacramento State and Chair of the Academic Senate of the California State University, Dr. Christine Miller.
Good morning. I hope you're enjoying your coffee. I figured the best way to wake up a crowd on an early morning is to use a quote from ancient Greece, don't you think? Socrates said, "The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms." Now, there's a lot of wisdom in this room, and I want to draw your attention not to my face. I thought that they were going to have the picture they had up before of the Graduation Initiative, and the byline of that is student success in innovation. I want you to think about the definition of student success. What's your definition of student success? What word or phrase would you use to characterize student success? You feel wiser? Well, the definition, if I were to ask you what your definitions were, they wouldn't be universal. It's not universal in national discussions. It's not universal in the CSU. It's not universal on campuses. It's kind of an elusive definition. So how do we know we're being wise? There's a whole host of variables and elements and dimensions to student success. So to get clarity from myself, I looked at campus websites to find wisdom. Campus websites, finding wisdom, maybe not the best place. But I looked at about a dozen campus websites until I decided that life is short and I would never get those hours back. And I entered in the search term for those websites, first, student success, and that didn't get me very far, and then the definition of student success. When I entered student success, I found all sorts of references to initiatives, offices, centers, institutes, committees, events, advising centers, and so on. When I put definitions of student success, I was led to WASC planning documents, strategic plans, town halls, and retreats that talk about those kinds of things. So my takeaway was that the prevailing wisdom on campuses is that student success is found in organizational structures like offices and in high-minded discussions like strategic planning. Now, there was some evidence on websites of how student success is operationally defined. You can look at what those offices say they do and the high-level discussions and what came out of those, and it gets us back to a huge laundry list of variables and elements and dimensions that make up student success. Here are some that I found. Graduation rates, and I bet a lot of you thought graduation rates when I asked you what your definition was. Graduation rates, persistence rates, access, advising, tutoring, mentoring, GPA, career placement and advancement, cohort engagement, remediation progress, time to degree, achievement of learning outcomes, and the list goes on. When all is said and done, I agree with Vincent Tinto, who said, ultimately, definitions of student success depend upon the institution, its mission and vision, student population, and specific needs of the students in competing in the global economy. But just because it depends on the campus, that doesn't make us any wiser. Remember, the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So I humbly suggest to you that each campus should get wise and define their terms. Put it up front. Make it easy to find on your website. Make it an explicit part of the frame that Deborah Santiago discussed yesterday. She talked about framing action. More specifically, using a frame to compel action. So defining student success should be the frame to compel action. She also said something that she said very quickly, but it hung with me because it really kind of makes my point. One of the things she said yesterday was, Latino student success is not necessarily graduation. Think about that for a second. Latino student success is not necessarily graduation. It could be a lot of other things. So I challenge you to be clear on your campus, what is student success? And let that definition compel action. If you need help, you can consult people like Dr. Joe Cuseo, who says defining student success is the critical first step in promoting it. He also says student success is best defined as a holistic phenomenon that embraces multiple dimensions of personal development and the multiple goals of higher education. By holistic, Dr. Cuseo means intellectual, emotional, social, ethical, physical, and spiritual development. That's certainly a lot more than graduation rates. Now, I'm a professor. I like to grade things. So I looked at those websites and I graded. Now, I don't want to shame anybody, so I'm not going to say which campuses earn an F, but you can grade yourselves. If you do the same thing I did, and go to your website and put in student success and definition of student success, see where it leads you. I will, though, offer 2 grades. The first is an A to Humboldt State. I found right away on their website, it says in part, student success is defined by personal and academic achievement, engagement in educationally purposeful activities, acquisition of desired knowledge, skills and competencies, persistence, attainment of educational objectives, and post-college performance. Nice job, Humboldt. The second grade I'm going to give is a C. That's average, and I'm going to give it to the CSU. I went to Cal State website, and that'll come up in a moment. And I'm going to give high marks to the website because it was the first hit when I put in student success, when I searched by that term. But when you see it, if you scroll down, there's going to be a box that says what student success means, and it's got 4 bullet points in it. I'm not going to take the time to read those bullets, but the content of that box where it says, what is student success? The first bullet emphasizes graduation rates and time to degree. The second bullet represents persistence. Then you get to the third bullet, college affordability. The fourth bullet, prospective students. This is a C. I give it an average definition because it focuses on the easily measurable and common dimensions of student success, but the last 2 are not about the success of an individual student as a whole person. And here I would reference what Sarah Goldrick-Robb said to us yesterday. She said we have a moral imperative that students be whole and intact when they graduate. She said we need to make a culture of care part of our mission. That picture of the whole student is missing, I think, from this definition, so that's why I give it a C. The CSU can do better than these 4 bullets, and I think they should do better. It's a moral imperative, and it starts with defining our terms. I'm pleased now to introduce Trustee Lillian Kimbell, Chair of the Board's Committee on Educational Policy.
Okay, starting again. My father died at the end of August. He never went to college. In fact, he dropped out of school when he was 16 and didn't receive his high school diploma until years later. My mom left school in Mexico at 14. Despite their lack of any higher education, they were able to buy a home and put 3 kids through college. But that was the late 70s and early 80s. Dad was in construction and a member of a strong union. UCLA, which we all attended, was about $200 a semester in those days. It was still a struggle, but they were able to provide us entree into the American dream. Fast forward 30 plus years, and the picture is much bleaker. Without a BA, it's unlikely that 1 or even 2 parents could provide the same opportunities today. Union jobs are disappearing and being replaced by low-paying jobs in the service or the gig economy. Automation and globalization have decimated whole swaths of well-paying jobs for those with only high school diplomas. The evidence is clear. A bachelor's degree is now the minimum requirement for any financially secure future. Or as we heard Dr. Goldrick-Robb quote a student yesterday, college is the only way to a decent life. As political scientist Francis Fukuyama says, social class, defined today by one's level of education, appears to have become the single most important social fracture. By studying millions of tax records, researchers from Stanford, Harvard, and Berkeley concluded in the Equality of Opportunity Project that the CSU is one of the top boosters of students out of the bottom 20 percentile of income into the middle class and beyond, and doing it with less resources than ever before. A recent PPIC report shows that relative to degrees awarded, spending at the CSU has not risen in the past few decades. The amount of money spent to produce those degrees actually declined by 17% from 1987 to 2013. Expenditure per degree fell from $67,000 to just $45,000. But this is unsustainable. I've been on the board for 3 years, and one thing is clear. Nearly every issue we deal with comes down to funding, or the lack of it. So to quote again the Wu-Tang Clan, cash rules everything around me. In several meetings, the elected officials on our board have admonished the rest of us not to approve tuition increases to meet growing costs because it would take the pressure off the legislature and governor to find enduring solutions. For me, that solution is clear and has been circulating for the past few years in Sacramento. The idea is straightforward. California's nearly $3 trillion economy is today made up mostly of services, approximately 80%, yet few services are taxed at all. To do so at a low rate of 2.5% would yield an estimated $16 billion in annual new revenue. Every 1% tax on this service economy would yield $7 billion. Importantly, because this consumption tax would be imposed at point of sale, up to $3 billion would be collected from out-of-state corporations like lawyers and financial advisors that do business in California. So, the responsible approach to fixing California's fiscal situation would be to adapt the tax system to our 21st century economy in a way that combines a new service tax with income tax cuts for the middle class and small businesses. Absent action on that front by the legislature, supporters of the CSU, faculty, employees, students and their families ought to do for the Cal State what the teachers' unions did for K through 14 in 1988, when they passed an initiative, Proposition 98, that guarantees that 40% of the general fund budget goes every year to K through 14 schools. The perpetual funding problem for Cal State could be solved in a similar way. A proposition to pass a 1% service tax with revenues dedicated to the CSU. Importantly, if that reliable stream of revenue were established, it could also be securitized for borrowing to upgrade and invest in sorely needed infrastructure. On a recent visit to Chico State, Trustee Peter Taylor and I were berated by a student for not doing our jobs and convincing the legislature to give the CSU the money we need. It seems to me that we're always beating around the bush when it comes to finances, and that undermines the ability for forward planning and long-term sustainability. Rather than waiting for the legislature to act, all Californians who benefit from an educated population, and we all do, should act. All stakeholders should literally take the initiative and take our case to the public, because in the end, we are not the bosses, the taxpayers are. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our morning speakers. We will now head down the hallway to the workshop breakout sessions, and we'll see you back here at 11:30. Thank you.